Tonight, new videos raising questions of what exactly happened in the lead-up to Alex Pretty's death.
This individual who came with weapons committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
This is real. This isn't. AI fakes are flooding our feed.
The question was, could we verify what happened?
Even the most secretive regimes in the world can't hide from the data they themselves collect.
Hello, everybody. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy. Thank you. I'm Krishnan from Channel 4 News, and I'm joined on stage by three of the best digital sleuths in the business, and you saw little glimpses of them in that video. Malachy Browne, next to me, founded the New York Times Visual Investigations team and has reported on some of the biggest stories in the world, from Sudan to January 6th to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. He and his team have scooped several awards, including Pulitzers, for their work. Merlyn Thomas has led investigations for BBC Verify in some of the world's most restricted reporting environments, from the Iran war to Gaza to the civil war in Sudan, and her work has contributed to parliamentary scrutiny and international criminal investigations. On the end, Christo Grozev is the rock star of investigative journalism, dogged, undeterred. He's the one who figured out and proved it was the Russian agents who poisoned the Skripals in Salisbury, and the late opposition leader Alexei Navalny in Russia, and many, many other investigations. You may well have seen the documentary about his extraordinary life as a journalist. Safe to say Putin is no fan. Let's start by hearing about an example of each of your work, to give us a sense of sort of what it is that's different about what you do. I mean, Malachy and Merlyn, you've both done a lot of remarkable work on the Iran war. When the internet was shut down, it was almost impossible for foreign journalists to get in, and so it was very, very difficult to get a sense of what was going on. You didn't have that sort of stream of information that comes out of Gaza. By comparison. Malachy, let's look at your work on the strike on the girls' school in Minab, which happened right at the beginning. How did you go about it?
Working with our Iran team, we heard reports that a school may have been hit in Minab. Could we look into it? And then by, I would say put yourself in the uploader's shoes, the witness's shoes. And so by finding out local language terms in Farsi and scouring Telegram and X in particular, but Telegram, which is a popular social channel in Iran, these images started to emerge very quickly after the initial reports that the school had been hit. And so the challenge for us is, this is great, we're not on the ground in Minab, access to Iran is restricted, but we're working the evidence provided by witnesses that are there. And the center image is the school, and so the challenge was to find out, is this indeed the school it was, by geolocating it and comparing it with satellite imagery, historic satellite imagery. Looking at the shadows, we can establish the time of day. But also the other images that were coming out, we could see that by also verifying where they were filmed, that the school, which was adjacent to a military base, was hit at the same time as the base. And so then, we're establishing what was hit, when it was hit, and then, you start asking questions, well, how did this happen?
And how easy is it to get the satellite images?
So the satellite image...
We've got one of them. But...
Yeah, the satellite image wasn't available at the time. We had to order it up. So we were working off historic ones to verify the remains of the building and whatnot. The reason that we ordered this up is that by looking at the other videos, it looked like when you look at the plumes of smoke, that buildings inside in that base had been specifically targeted, which to us suggested precision strikes which would be more consistent with Israeli and American capabilities as they're taking out military installations across Iran. And so this image, which came in about 4 days later, confirmed that. And by then we had started putting questions to officials in both Israel and Iran. And so we had a working hypothesis that it was a US strike that had taken out the school and misidentified it.
And it was the image of the missile itself that became crucial evidence.
Yeah, we ran a story before this video came out saying that it looked like it was US strikes. Obviously, President Trump was disputing that, but then this image came out of a Tomahawk missile, and only the US in this conflict is using Tomahawks, and it's distinctly a Tomahawk by the length of the missile, the wings positioned where it is, the diameter of it as well, but also the fuselage is built into it. So the other missiles of this sort of caliber have sort of propulsion engines on the outside, so they're not as sleek as this. And this image then shows it hitting the same base about an hour or two after the school was hit. And so, that was pretty firm evidence.
And then we have this sort of extraordinary contrast between facts and images that are verifiable and what gets said by politicians. Let's have a look at what Trump said when he was asked about this.
We think it was done by Iran. Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
And it was very, very slow in terms of getting the American position to shift.
The American position hasn't really shifted all that much, because the day after the video of the Tomahawk emerged, my colleague Sean McCreesh was asking Trump that on Air Force One. The following day, he asked him down in Miami. Trump was suggesting that Iran could have got their hands on a US Tomahawk and fired it. So he kind of seems to just kind of say whatever comes into his head in a defensive posture. But they said at the time they're investigating, they still haven't responded to our queries or, finalized that investigation. And at this stage, they certainly know what happened.
Merlyn, around the same time, you're working on a similar story of a strike on a sports hall in which 21 people were killed. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we dug into this story that happened in a town in southern Iran called Lamed, and it took place on the very first day of the war, but the footage didn't come out until much later, and that was because of that internet blackout in Iran. And it was just a few seconds, it's this video here, but just a few seconds can tell you a lot, because it's not just about the shape of the missile, but it's also about the direction, the speed, the way it explodes. Is it on target? Is it malfunctioning? There's a lot that you can tell from just a few seconds. And several weapons experts analyzed this footage and told us that this was likely a state-of-the-art US missile known as a PRISM, and it's never been known to have been used in combat before. So we published our findings after we'd verified the video and along with lots of other visual evidence that we had. And subsequently, the New York Times also reported on the story and came to the same conclusions. And a few days later, CENTCOM, the US military, they published a pretty definitive statement. They denied that there was a US missile used in this incident. They called the media reports false, implying ours and the New York Times' reporting. And they went further. They actually specified that an Iranian Havazeh cruise missile was used. And so we did what we always do. We tested the claims against the evidence that we had. And so we cast the net even further with more experts, and 6 independent experts analyzed the footage, and they said that this was not an Iranian Havazeh missile. And that's because of really specific things like the turbojet that weren't there, and specific kind of visual characteristics that you can see there, as well as verified photos of the aftermath, those pockmarks that you can see on the walls. They're characteristic, they said, of what happens when a PRISM missile explodes. But we also dug into the reporting further. We identified a 3rd strike on the residential area, and we dug into the backgrounds of the victims of those killed, including a 2-year-old. And similar to the investigation in Minab, the US still hasn't responded to the findings of our investigation.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the New York Times. I mean, how different, I suppose, is your kind of journalism when it comes to competition and collaboration? You know, do you think, I mean, it's useful for you, isn't it, when the New York Times comes to the same conclusion with what is often, you know, raw materials that anyone can get hold of?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about this. I think it's very much a collaborative industry in terms of we are pooling together resources and knowledge, and we are learning from each other as well. And so I think it's good because we're on the same side. We're trying to find out what happened and get to the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there are so many teams now in different newsrooms doing similar type of work, and our initial passes of that have become far more competitive. Even satellite imagery has been somewhat commoditized because we all have access to similar imagery. And so, yeah, I think it's about, you know, when you get access on the ground, or you're bringing different skills to bear in your findings and that kind of stuff. And we don't always agree. I mean, sometimes there are differences of opinion. But in this case, I think the repeated goes at this story and the denials by the US, BBC and New York Times and others were building off each other's work, I think, in this case.
Christo, I mean, let's come to your journalism, which is a different kind of journalism, I think, to sort of immediate news reaction, and has had, you know, some very, very profound effects. When I interviewed you for Channel 4 News, I think I sort of said, how many spies have you exposed? And you said thousands. And, you know, my jaw is sort of on the floor. The scale of what you're doing is enormous. How do you do it?
Well, finding spies is not a problem, and once you learn how to identify them, it becomes routine. Figuring out what they're up to is the problem, and without that context, there's no story. I mean, yes, I do have a list of maybe 7,500 Russian spies, confirmed spies, but it's only about 300 of them that we know what they've done, what they're up to, what they're planning to do. And without that knowledge, there's nothing I can publish about the rest, because every country has spies. I mean, Russia happens to have some bumbling idiots and some very professional ones, and doing a lot of malign operations, more than most other countries. So it's interesting that they have these people, but again, the difficulty is finding out an actual operation, and ideally to disclose it before it succeeds. But even in the case where it does succeed, it's still important to attribution.
Can you give us a sense, you know, we've heard from what their sort of sources are, if you like. Give us a sense of sort of where you get your information.
When I started this 11 years ago, I was just learning about the existence of a gray market of leaked data, of data for sale that is correlated with corrupt governments and centralized information systems of governments that won't control their subjects or their citizens, such as the Russian government, such as Iran, China, and so on and so forth. So paired with corruption in government, that creates a layer of obtainable data. Now I don't have to actually go to that corrupt layer because there's an abundance of leaked data, which comes both from disgruntled people working in Russian government databases, IT personnel for major companies that leak data and hope that some journalist finds it and does something with it. Ukrainian hackers and global hackers working for large international, multinational IT companies that are just lending their free time to help the Ukrainians to hack into Russian government databases. So at this point, it's more of you buried in a sea of big data, and you have to find a story in it. So that's how my work has changed. And some of the recent discoveries have been based on, again, you stare at terabytes of data and you try to find a story in it. And one of the latest investigations into this new clandestine unit that Russia created was the result of such search.
Yeah, I mean, tell us about that, because it's partly in response to trying to work out what to do about you and people like you.
Yeah, this is a crazy story. It's a meta investigation because it's almost like season 4 of a Netflix show about my investigations, because one of the sort of things I had under my belt, or together with my colleagues at Bellingcat and later at The Insider, was essentially exposing one of the most offensive Russian clandestine units, Unit 29155. We laid bare their operations. They're the guys who poisoned the Skripals, who killed an innocent bystander in 2018, and did a lot of other malign activity. They exploded munition facilities, killed people in doing that in Czechia, Bulgaria, and many other countries. So we had we had granular knowledge of who they are. We exposed them, we showed the tradecraft that they use to a degree where they were seen as unusable anymore. So the Russian government decided to create a sort of a successor entity that would be hidden completely from journalists' view. And because they knew how to discover the previous ones, we matched their addresses to government addresses, to military addresses. They decided this time they'll do it in a completely different way. And they buried this new secret unit in a company, in a corporate structure in Russia. That happened to be the Kalashnikov concern, which manufactures AK-47, like one of the biggest brands in Russia. And because it's such a large organization with hundreds of thousands of employees, they thought these 500 people will be hidden very well. And the problem with that is that as a military-industrial company, it was targeted by Ukrainian hackers just because they wanted to see what the equipment they were doing. And suddenly they end up in a PowerPoint presentation that outlines this new unit in commercial terms. And I didn't know that PowerPoint had all those icons for tanks and for missiles, but it was literally, yeah, this is it. This is it. And this is just one of 10 slides, and some of the slides showed churn and expected churn, business churns, growth paths, growth churns, and like only 33% of every applicant gets accepted in our exclusive company. And like, how do you hide something in a commercial company where everything leaks, essentially, right? So thanks to this PowerPoint presentation, we were able to map out the full, like 503 people that are employed there. But then it got better, and I don't know that we have time for the whole story, but again, we knew this, but without knowing what they're up to, what they've done or are planning to do, there's no story. So we sat on this for about a year without being able to find something that they've actually done. Until the FBI arrested somebody in Colombia a month ago, and we quickly figured out that he was one of these people because we knew the name from this org chart here. And we were able to reconstruct what this person did upon his arrest there, and we were able to get access to his Telegram chats that were leaked right after he was arrested. And it was just a blunder after blunder of this new secretive operation. And it's rewarding, I have to say.
Yeah.
One of the craziest things they did is, and this is not something we were able to benefit from, but the FBI did when they tracked this operation and have them arrested. This guy who was arrested, he was recruiting agents around the world to do their bidding to assassinate people. And because they didn't speak Russian, they didn't speak any other language, they communicated on Google Translate. And the FBI were reading that in real time, like daily reports from would-be assassins.
There's a level of sort of stupidity from the people you're dealing with, but also if you're dealing with hacked data, how do you make sure you're on the right side of the law?
Well,
or does that not matter?
Again, it's war. What we have to understand is we are at war with bad actors at the moment, and the real problem here is validating hacked data, not really deciding to use it or not to use it, as long as you don't do the hacking yourself, and that has always been kind of a golden rule for journalism. The rest is kind of, well, if somebody's done it, you validate, you make sure that you're not being fed something that somebody wants to publish. We never take data that is hacked by governments either. That's another problem, the ethical problem, and that's a history that goes back to my time at Bellingcat. We never want to do the bidding of any government, good or bad. So if commercial hackers happen to hack into something and leak it out there, share it with journalists, our goal is only to verify that it's real.
Merlyn, let's talk about AI and the impact. We saw in that opening video, proliferation of AI video, trying to mislead all of us, and especially people like you. I think we've got a little clip from one of your reports about how you work out what's real and what's fake.
This video got 70 million views, claiming to show an Iranian missile attacking a US fighter jet, but it's actually footage from a video game. Some fake videos like this one are more obvious. The fireworks here are out of place, but a still from the same video is much more convincing. Compare this with the real photo, which we have verified, which shows smoke rising, not a fireball.
So is it getting harder?
It's becoming increasingly difficult to figure out what's real and what's fake, and that's partly because some of the AI detector tools, the tools that can find out whether something is AI generated or not, they're developing nowhere near as quickly as the tools that are developing and generating AI content. And so they bring up false positives, false negatives. They're just not reliable on their own. And so the most reliable tool that we still have are our eyes. And so that's literally just looking at photos and videos. And there are still visual clues, markers that are left behind by AI content. AI is still not very good at kind of doing lettering or writing on signposts, posters, whatever that may be. There's still other things like lighting inconsistencies, blurring of the skin, and obviously the usual thing that we talk about, digits, hands, feet, fingers, that kind of thing. So there are clues, but it is becoming increasingly difficult. And I think what we should also kind of keep in mind is not all of the claims that are, not all of the AI content is based off completely false claims. Often there is an event. We see this all the time in breaking news events where AI content is created to simulate what the event actually is, but it's not a real video. It's just trying to be and seem like the video. And we saw that all the time in Iran, where we saw strikes in particular places. And as you saw just there was a strike in that particular location. It just wasn't that video.
I mean, Malachy, we can see how fast AI systems are advancing every few months.
Yep.
They're getting very, very much more powerful. I mean, you know, in your opening example, it presumably wouldn't have been that hard to change the missile to an Iranian missile.
Yep.
And you know, and you're going to get to a point soon, aren't you, where it's going to be almost impossible to tell.
Yes, potentially. But what we're doing as journalists is we're never relying on that one piece of video, and even within the video. So it crossed my mind that maybe that video was AI manipulated, but it was filmed by a construction site that was an active construction site, and so I could see sandbags in a particular place. And so I could also see those in satellite imagery, which gave me time. So I knew that you couldn't have manufactured that video with that level of detail unless you sort of had extreme local knowledge. But you're right. Yeah, if you're relying on a single video, as we were in the case of the Tomahawk, things can happen. But I think generative AI, it's just another part of this erosion of trust that earlier speakers spoke about. Like, what is reality? What can we trust anymore? And so. For us, that's the importance of showing our work and explaining our processes.
And presumably, really important to marry what you're doing with on-the-ground reporting wherever it's possible.
Absolutely, that's the best type of journalism. We were talking earlier about some of the work that we did on Bucha, where we identified the Russian unit that killed lots of civilians when they occupied that town. That wouldn't have been possible unless two of our journalists, Yusra Al-Hlu and Masha Froliak, were on the ground and then working with our team, collecting evidence.
I mean, Christo, the Russians aren't the only people, are they, sort of very actively involved in pumping out quite a lot of this stuff?
No, they're not, but they have created best or worst practices in this area that are being borrowed. In electoral manipulation, I was just on an advisory board of the Bulgarian government in the eve of the Bulgarian elections, because the European Union were wary of what foreign manipulation might be occurring there. We did a monitoring project of what really happened in the election, in the run-up to the elections. And we found that there was some Russian direct manipulation using fake videos, AI, but a lot of the manipulation came from local parties who were using what Russia had developed and used and tested in the American elections, tested in Hungary before. So that proliferation of bad practices is what the problem is, not necessarily that Russia will always be behind every operation. But Russia has one advantage over many other bad actors, which is that they've created not a centralized operation of, okay, we have this institute creating deep fakes. They've created a whole market, a very market-driven approach to using AI in disinformation and creating confusion around the world. And there's no cost of failure in that. I mean, it has oligarchs who are trying to contribute their own divisions, doing fakes and AI distribution and manipulation. They have military units who are competing with one another. And they have literal companies, like small startups that compete in that. And because the cost of failure is zero there, but the rewards and the spoils are huge, and because AI does not create, using AI for bad fakes or for good fakes, is not really suffering from the shortcomings of AI today, because you'll have a couple of bad ones, but you'll have a lot of good ones, and if anything, hallucination is a good thing in that case, where it's a bad thing for everybody else who wants to use AI for good purposes. So that is the problem, that Russia is treating this as a market.
Just finally, I kind of want to delve briefly into your YouTube channel, which I think is where the internet goes full circle, because you are now also producing cat videos. Well, a cat lady video. Just explain. Let's have a look at this clip that's on your YouTube channel, and then you can explain it.
Called a Russian spy using her cat. I know it's a serious story. We call her the cat lady in our professional speak. This was the Russian illegal spy, a long-term sleeper agent who went by the name of Maria Adela Kufeld-Rivera. Yeah, the story with this is, we published this in 2022 as a big written investigation. It was a serious story about this Russian illegal deep cover spy who had infiltrated NATO, causing untold damage in terms of leaks of secrets and befriending spies. And at the time it was read by you and colleagues. And we made sure that information went to law enforcement after we published it. And we thought that the chapter is closed on that. 3 years later, my son convinced me to start making videos about my old investigations. We published this cat video, and it got 16 million views on YouTube or on Instagram, which is, none of my investigation would get like 1/10 of that before. And here's the catch. I mean, I get a call from one law enforcement agency, I won't name the country, right after we published this video, and they're asking for a coffee to talk about something. I'm like, well, what is it about? Well, can you give us all data about the cat and the owner? I'm like, guys, you knew about this 4 years ago. I know you knew it because there was communication. And they said, yeah, but nobody noticed it. And now there's this cat video that made everybody watch it. So literally, my son's idea to use cat videos as a conduit for serious stories has worked.
And on that, thank you very much indeed. Can I ask you to thank the panel?
Thank you.